This episode of Inside EMS is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support, and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's Lexipol.com. Well, this is it. Once again, it's time to go inside EMS. I am your host, Chris Cebollero, and you can see that is not Kelly Grayson. Kelly Grayson is out training the next generation of EMS provider, doing whatever it is that Kelly Grayson does when he's on special assignment. But you always hear him talk about all the time, well, Nancy said, and Nancy, and Nancy, and Nancy, and who the heck is Nancy? Well, this is Nancy. This is Nancy Magee. She is an EMS1 contributor. She is a national speaker, and she is an advocate for the EMS volunteers that are out there, and the newest podcast host that we'll talk about towards the end, the Redesigning Volunteer EMS podcast that we'll talk about. But Nancy, I want to thank you very much for sitting in the co-host chair for your maybe not better half, but your half, Kelly Grayson. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
And I got to tell you, man, I think I've told you this before. I mean, you are going right to heaven. I don't know how you do it, but being with him part-time for 10 years, it takes its toll on me. I'm in some therapy. I don't really want to talk about that, but I appreciate you being here. And you guys have been together for a bit, and you've been a staple in, certainly the discussions of, kind of influencing Kelly on some of his things. So thanks for joining us. But you are really that advocate in the volunteer space. And when we think about this, volunteer EMS is very, very challenging in these days, right? And you've been talking about it for a lot of years, but there seems to be this mass exodus going on with volunteerism in EMS. And is it just time that, volunteerism is going away? Should we make that concerted effort? I feel that we should save it. But I think my first question to you is, what's going on with this exodus?
Well, I think the volunteers have kind of been the canary in the coal mine for a lot of years in terms of EMS in general, as they've particularly been the pipeline for a lot of services, both private and commercial services, for a long time. And in very, very rural areas, they're struggling as people are making exodus from the cities, moving into small, rural areas where they can work from home, but they don't really have any concept of volunteerism. So the call volume rises, there's more people there, but there's not more people that know anything about volunteering. And to be fair, the actual percentage of the population in the United States that volunteers has not changed a whole lot. It went way up after 9/11. We talked about that before, and it has kind of adjusted. But what we've known for 20 years is that volunteerism overall, whether it's church, EMS, fire, whatever, people want to do smaller amounts of time. So as there's been a shortage, there has been more of a demand on the people that are currently doing the job, and they're getting older. So they're just kind of like, and the pandemic, with the older folks really was a problem. If that's your volunteer job, it's hard to justify not being able to go to work or bring something home to your family during the pandemic. So we lost a lot of people there. At this point, I think having known, and EMS is guilty of this too. We keep hearing from the people in the field what they need, and we keep doing something else. We don't recognize them the way they want to be recognized. We don't schedule them the way they want to be scheduled. We don't talk to them or treat them or make them feel important. They keep telling us this, no different for volunteers than anybody else, and we keep doing something different. We'll give you a pizza party. We'll give you 50 cents, we'll give you overtime. We won't pay attention when you come in late or whatever, or sleep on the job, and get no recognition for being the one person that shows up every day on time looking professional. So we just don't do the things that are expected. And so I think that's a large part of it.
Yeah, and I think that those are some really great points. And, one of the things that I kind of said in my opening was, does volunteerism need to go by the wayside now? I mean, we think about this from a development standpoint, and really volunteerism is, if we go back to the start of EMS, and modern day EMS isn't 60 years old yet, right? And when we think about this from the start, it's like people almost had a sense of patriotism. They didn't really have the call volume. So the community really volunteered to step in and be firefighters and be EMS providers. But now, as we get into 2024, and in your expert opinion, is volunteerism really dead because of where we've gotten to in our career? Is it time now to start staffing and paying for all these systems? Or is it really that it just needs to be, I don't know, revived? We need to give it mouth to mouth resuscitation and bring it back.
Honestly, I think I'm a firm believer in community self-determination. I think that the community should decide what level of EMS they want. They have to understand what it'll cost and they have to support whatever they decide on. So if they want to have community-based local EMS, it's up to the volunteers to sell them that package. If they're going to go strictly on cost, they have to understand that there's going to be a big company that's going to come in, give them a no bid. We'll do this for free. And then 2 years later, when there's no more volunteers, they're going to say, guess what? We're not making any money. If you want us to stay here, you're going to give us some money. So I think that there are many, many areas in the country that it's just not feasible that they could come up with the money to pay for, the University of Maine study that came out last year said that to start up and maintain one small rural, it doesn't even have to be rural, but one small BLS level agency is over $1 million a year. So how is that going to happen when the labor cost is about 80% of that? And if volunteers are contributing even half, that's a huge help for the community. And on top of that, I think there's the whole intrinsic value of having local people who are there because, and I'm not saying that people who do this as career don't want to help people, but it is their community. These are people that know they are invested. I stayed in a town where I hated the volunteer agency I worked for because I had a 16-year-old that was driving in town. And I wanted to make sure that there was me and a couple of other people that might be able to respond. So not somebody coming in from the outside who knows where they're coming from, who knows what they know. So I think that in terms of should volunteerism go away, I don't think it's feasible. I think that people talk about it. I don't see it happen. So I think all EMS needs to be funded. It needs to be funded as cost of readiness. There has to be some accountability for that funding in place. And I think that volunteers should be held accountable, the same as any other agency, but they also need to be given the support they need in terms of logistics, training, recruitment help, and whatever.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things that we think about is you're up there in New York now, New York State, really kind of close to Canada. How's your French? Is your French coming along, by the way? Being
No,
that
my
close?
Spanish is actually much
Oh,
better. So, but everybody up here sounds Canadian, so
yeah.
it's kind of funny. Yeah.
That's right. That's being as close to Canada as you are. But there's a lot of volunteerism in upstate New York. I mean, we do
Yes.
see a lot of that still. And, I've got friends that are up there that are volunteers and, they really are striving to try to make the system work as best they can. And it really does become a struggle. So when we think about struggle, Nancy, one of the things that I think is important when we think about this is people are, they have jobs, they're going to their jobs, they're waiting for the balloon to go up where they hear their sirens. They'll leave their jobs and they'll do what they need to do. But the question of skills and competency always seems to come up when it comes to volunteers. And there are a lot of people who will argue that these folks are incompetent in doing the job. So when we think about this from the standpoint of, how, volunteers are able to provide care, is this a concern for volunteers or is this just
Yeah.
an argument that people want to have?
It should be a concern. And I have seen really good, whether it's the same, whether it's a career system or whether it's volunteers. I've seen really poor care in both. I've seen really great care in both. Again, it all comes down to leadership and the ability of someone that's in charge to make sure that their people are competent. So as far as volunteers go, the problem is they have this great demand on time. You have to put in whatever 50 hours or more a month, and they focus on the time that they're given as crew. So what I would say is, if people come in as an EMT, they've all gone through the same class, regardless, New York is a little different, but most have national registry. It is incumbent upon the leadership to say, I know you didn't come here to be the most mediocre EMT taking care of your community that ever lived. So this is what you need to do, and we're going to follow up on your skills. There are many, many ways that people can become competent. And one of the ways I look at it is, if you wanted to be a great pianist or a great golfer, you're not going to practice at a concert. You're not going to practice in a golf game. You're going to go and drill. You are going to go find a pro to help you out. That's how you become confident. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to have a whole lot of call volume, but you have to understand that if you want to play the game, you need to be at a certain skill level and put it on them, but also make the opportunities affordable, available, interesting, relevant. And I think that you would see when you have that you have to manage expectations, I guess is what it is.
Yeah,
So
I think
yes, I think that they can be very competent.
yeah, but I do think that the explanation that you said, and I don't want to gloss over it, was there is expectation and accountability to those expectations. And
Mhm.
we have to be able to ensure that they remain as competent as they can be. You don't find a lot of paramedics that are volunteers, and a lot of times they're at the basic level. And when you think about the skills that we have at the basic level, we really have to be able to focus on getting people to the definitive care that they need. But, you've alluded to this a couple times, and Kelly and I, we applaud the cities that really go above and beyond to do something for the volunteers, i.e., they're giving them tax breaks, or i.e., they're helping them with, whatever it is. But you've alluded to this a couple times, and I've heard you say it, and I really want to focus on it. Should EMS volunteers be financially supported? And if they are, what's the mechanism to do that?
Well, yeah, I think so. When you look at if you look at the current value of volunteer time nationwide, is about $25 an hour. So one volunteer putting in one 12-hour shift a week is saving their community $15,000 to $18,000 in labor costs. Excluding if they have some stipends or whatever. Why should they not have some kind of a break for that as an incentive? I don't think we should be paying people hourly. That runs into all kinds of labor laws and whatever. But I think it's fair to have people get a tax break, maybe community college access. There's a lot of things. I would go like the National Guard model, without the actual paycheck if I ran the world. Or honestly, it would be more like Israel or someplace, other countries in Europe where it's just, you spend so much time, in civic service. But since that's not going to happen here, I think absolutely it has to be understood by the community that EMS costs money. And you're getting a great bang for the buck if you have competent, local, readily available volunteers. I also think that there's a couple of states that require the leadership or the director of the organization to be a paid employee who is accountable to the local government. And I think that's a great idea. I think a community paramedic and a director and a bunch of volunteers in a small town is just an excellent option. And that way they have real leadership, real direction, but there's a cost to that. Nobody's going to want to do it for, who knows, chump change, which is what all of EMS makes now. And a lot of volunteer agencies are hybrid. They're paying people. They should be paying people as much as they possibly can. They don't need to make a profit. They need to have the best people they can to help their volunteers. And they need to educate their community on the value of EMS, in general, and make them understand that any EMT or paramedic coming into your community is not getting paid what they need to get paid, and you need to support them.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of the things that you also do in your career is you do consulting with volunteer agencies. And you kind of said if you ran the world, this is how you would see it. If you're going in to assist a volunteer agency, I mean, what's your approach? I mean, what's your consulting approach to assisting them with polishing the system, to making sure that it's something they can be proud of, ensuring that they're getting the competencies that they need for skill? I mean, so in your role as a consultant, how do you handle that with EMS agencies? What's your approach?
Very carefully. It's very easy to offend people, not just in the current environment, but you have people that are kind of used to taking shots. I was a volunteer. I know what it's like to get treated poorly at a hospital, to get treated poorly by a fire department, to get, dismissed by a paramedic. And when you spend a lot of time, and especially when you hear, well, leadership is a problem, it's the lack of education and leadership, not the actual people who want to lead, So when they hear you suck, they don't want to hear anything from you. So again, my approach would be sitting down with everyone and managing expectations. What is it that one thing that we don't ask volunteers enough is, what do you want to get out of this experience? And then make sure that you live up to that expectation. So talk to the leadership. What is it that they need? Usually it's because they're running out of people, running out of money, and oh my God, now we need to have somebody tell us what to do. So, again, and Kelly will say this, like eat an elephant, take small bites and have small successes, and people will start to buy into fixing that. And so that's what I do. I do a SWOT analysis on the organization. I try and do one on the individuals. And I try and talk to each person there about and manage the expectations. And if they need more people, fit the people coming into the expectations. And Kelly and I talked about this the other day. It's that whole form follows function architectural plan. Don't go in there with a plan. Go in and say, what do you need, and build it to what you need to have.
Yeah, and it is same with any consulting agency, and that's one of the things that I think has made me consultant successful as a leadership consultant is I don't go in with canned answers. We
Mhm.
develop the processes and the programs and the procedures that need to be developed for that particular agency. The expression of if you've seen one EMS agency, you've seen one EMS agency. Well, it's the same thing for organizations as well. And you can't put this into a canned answer to say, this is the response. It really has to be developed. So I applaud that philosophy that you have. One of the things that I've said for a long time is that when we think about volunteerism, all of EMS is volunteerism. And you may agree or disagree with me, Nancy, but our paid employees can go work anywhere they want. It just so
Mhm.
happens that we can pay them to stay, but they're volunteers when they come into our agency. And we really need to change our focus and our philosophy to think about whether we pay our employees or not. This is something that we really have to be cognizant of to keep them, to give them the feel that they're special, right? Because they could really go anywhere. You take a volunteer employee or a volunteer EMS provider that doesn't get reimbursed or doesn't get any benefit other than the pride of supporting their community, and we treat them bad, and they're not going to respond to that bell when it goes off, right? Well, the same thing with paid employees. If we treat them bad, they're not going to stay with us. They'll find somewhere else. So if we think about this from the standpoint of engagement, in your opinion, what's the best way that we can keep our folks engaged, whether they're paid, whether they're volunteers, to ensure that we are taking the lead in influencing and motivating them to stay with our agencies?
I think the first thing is we need to, like I said, people have been telling us what they want for many years, and we've been doing something else. We have recognition once a year. We maybe get a 50-cent raise. We maybe get, I think in career EMS, you have a lot of, and I got this as a new manager in a different industry. We don't have time to tell you what you're doing right. You need to do this, your charts get flagged, whatever. There's no feedback loop with the hospital. That has to change. People have to know that what they do made a difference. I think that's the biggest thing, is understanding you're important to the agency. We need you, and what you do every day, whether it's putting the little old lady back in her bed, or recognizing that she's decompensating. It's not just that she dropped the remote this time. They need to know that everything they do makes a difference. Just being there so that somebody has the peace of mind knowing if I pick up the phone and call 911, someone that is going to come and help me. I think understanding that that's important. I think that if people, even career people, because I talk to a lot of them, it would make them feel better about their job, because they talk a lot about, oh, we get all these crap calls and who wants to go out to the same person all the time. Take that call and make it be something that makes you feel good about yourself, that makes you understand you're doing a difference. Leadership has to direct that. I've had chiefs say, well, everybody comes out for the good calls, but nobody comes out for the crap calls. And if the chief is saying that, what is he telling the people that are there? So I think there's that. I think it's a recognition. And again, what is it that you need to get from us? Maybe we can't do all of it, but if you even do part of it and meet that expectation, 100%, that goes a long way.
I love it. Very good. So let's switch gears a little bit. You have taken a page from Kelly, and we've been doing this show 10 years now. I mean, he says it's the second longest relationship he's ever had. I know I'm the better for that. But you now are doing a podcast, the Redesigning Volunteer EMS podcast.
Mhm.
And what was the catalyst for you starting that? I know it's your voice for your expertise, right? But when you think about that and you said maybe this is going to be a benefit, how'd you get here and how'd you develop this show?
Well, we started, prior to the pandemic down in Louisiana, actually, doing an audio podcast. And then it just got logistically difficult for a couple of years. And at this point, people are so secluded. I talked to people in different parts of the country, and I thought, and outside of the country, and I thought, what if we had a forum where what people need is, they need to have some oxygen. They need to be able to talk to like-minded people and not just hear from me, this works in my agency, or I share your concern, other people. So I'm just a facilitator basically in this podcast. I'll throw out something to talk about. Sometimes it goes in that direction, sometimes it doesn't, depending on who drops in. So they seem to really enjoy meeting other people. And I am blessed that I have people that I've worked with previously with a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience. And the fact that they still want to come out, they're not saying, yeah, the way we always did it. No, they're saying, this is why I am still in this business. And that is really important for people to hear. There's a lot of leadership in volunteer EMS that are kind of, still the doom. Well, I'll do it until, but it's time is coming up. My answer to that is if you don't believe in the mission, get out, you know? And so I'm trying to provide a forum where people who are maybe struggling with that, I'm the only one that cares, can come and talk about what's going on. I give them a lot of stuff I use in workshops that people actually pay significant money for. I'll give them templates. I'll give them, ideas for programs that they can run in their organization. If they want to use it or not, up to them. So I get we have the Facebook page that people interact on. I put a lot of stuff up there. I share a lot of different things from different agencies around the country. And I think that bringing everybody together for a common goal is what I'm trying to accomplish with this podcast.
What is the Facebook page?
The same thing, Redesigning Volunteer EMS.
Okay, awesome. And do the shows get put up there, or where can they find the shows?
We have not yet done that because, well, first of all, there's the editing issue, as you know, which is time consuming. And also I'm kind of torn between, I have a lot of people that may come in and say things that they don't necessarily want everybody in their district to hear about. So I'm kind of torn between giving them the opportunity to come and have that one, that conversation here that people listening in might hear, but there's nothing really that's putting them on the spot. Yep. I want them to feel free to talk openly. So I think there will probably be something I do in terms of writing up a summary of what's happened. And I use a PowerPoint and I keep, a PDF of that ongoing. So if anybody wants to, catch up or see what we've been talking about, they can sign in and see what the comments have been and what I've been kind of leading to. A lot of it is pictures because I'm an ADD person. So when I have a lot of memes and pictures, so they may not understand it, but most of the core content's there.
Well, very cool. And I haven't heard it yet, but I look forward to listening, and I look forward to being a guest. If you ever need a guest, please don't hesitate. But
Absolutely.
Nancy, I mean, let's put a cap on this now, right? So when we think about this from a volunteer, I mean, I think you're one of the foremost experts in the United States when it comes to volunteer EMS, and I appreciate your advocacy because who's going to do it, right? Someone has to do it, and you've stepped in, and we've known each other for a lot of years, and you've been on this path for a lot of years. So if you give us a final thought on volunteerism and EMS, what do you share with the listeners?
Well, I believe that volunteerism in every aspect is at the core of a civil society, which we need more than ever right now. So being a volunteer brings you in with people you didn't know before, who do things that people you might never have been involved with. You go out into the field and you see people who are maybe not anything like you on any kind of demographic. And you learn that they're human beings just like you are. And it brings something to you. And I said this last night on the podcast. I've always said, and I wasn't the first one to say it, that volunteering is its own reward. It really can help you in your headspace, but you don't get that until you try it. Once you do it, you're like, oh, now I get it. So I think that we need to be positive. I think we need to be realistic. We need to understand that EMS is EMS. And if you don't want to live up to the responsibilities of being a competent EMT, you should join the garden club, or something else that isn't taking care of people. But overall, it's a blessing, and it made a huge difference in my life as a new volunteer. That's why I do this. I became a pilgrimage to say, my life was in a bad place at one time. I became an EMS volunteer. It took me right out of my head, put everything in perspective, and I knew no matter what else was going on, I made a difference in my community and for my family. So that's what I would tell people, what the attraction is and why they should maybe give it a shot.
Well, certainly you're a great voice for volunteer EMS, and I've enjoyed listening to you over the years. And I want to thank you for joining us on the show, stepping in for Kelly and, being in his seat. We may have to just figure out how to do this on a regular basis and just push him out of this whole process and you become the coach. No, I couldn't do that to him. The second longest relationship he's ever had. But Nancy Magee, I want to thank you for joining us on Inside EMS. You're a consultant. You're a contributor to EMS One. I love reading your stuff. You're a speaker and now podcast host, the Redesigning Volunteer EMS podcast. I'm excited for you. and I wish you great success. Go ahead and, if you're listening to us, go ahead and check it out, and we'll get your share some of our listeners with you. But I appreciate you joining us, and of course, you're welcome to join us anytime that you want to come on the show.
Thanks so much, Chris. I think Kelly and I kind of balance each other out in a lot of ways. So, but we both have the same goal. So
Yep.
thanks again
My
for allowing me to talk about my passion.
And anytime, you're welcome anytime. So everybody out there, I mean, you think about volunteer EMS, I think we all have an opinion on it. And we'd love to
Mhm.
be able to have, to listen to your opinion. Go ahead and, comment on the Facebook page when this is out, or go ahead and send us an email at the show at ems1.com. For Kelly Grayson, I'm Chris Cebollero. And for our guest, Nancy Magee, I want to thank you for joining us on Inside EMS, and we'll talk to everyone again next week.
Thanks again, Chris.